YouTube vinyl community, mamas and the papas fans, random people on the internet. My name is Giggens, and we're here today to talk about the Mamas and the Papas' second album, Cass, John, Michelle, Denny, which is spelled wrong, the Mamas and the Papas, released on Dunham Records in 1966. Hit the US number 4, UK number 24, and it's a fascinating album because it's such a mystery. Long story short, I'm going to try and make this as short as possible. The Mamas and the Papas have a really interesting history where they just love to, really be with each other. They were a really, really close band. And at one point, Denny and Michelle had gotten together. And for those who haven't figured the story out yet, these two were married. John and Michelle were married, and then Michelle and Denny were together for a couple seconds there, and then they forgave that and wrote a song about it, which is on this album. But the second time things got a little weird, Michelle was with Gene Clark from the Byrds, and once Papa John found out about that, he was like, nah, we're gonna kick you out this time. So they kicked out Mama Michelle from the band June 4th, 1966, and it officially went through on June 28th as being like the official date that she was axed from the Mamas and the Papas. So when this happened, they were like halfway through making their album. They had done like 5 or 6 songs already, and a whole bunch of the dense layering vocals that they were known for. So to fill in the gap, Lou Adler, who they were good friends with and produced their albums, his girlfriend happened to be Jill Gibson, who was already a songwriter and a really, really talented singer in her own right. And so she got pegged to be the next Mama. She was Mama Jill. And she joined the band for almost 2 months. And she went to London with them to rehearse the new songs and some of the old songs, so they were going to do some shows over there. And she did record a bunch of songs for this album. And the more details on that later. But so as they were making this album, and as they were touring and they were playing shows with Jill, there's rumors that people in the audience were heckling, and there's rumors that people in the audience were yelling, "Where's Michelle?" Apparently it only happened like once or twice, but it's been turned into this thing over the years where people just like had this monstrous fit that Michelle wasn't there. So this album jacket had already been printed up with this picture, their name, Mamas and the Papas. This was going to be the album. When Michelle left, they realized, we can't put this out anymore, we need to do something. So there was a rumor that there was also an idea that they had Jill pose in this exact situation that Michelle's doing, and then they were going to just like superimpose her picture into this, and I guess just write Jill up here instead or something, and then put this out. They realized that was going to be extremely time consuming and probably a giant pain in the ass, so they didn't do it. And instead, they took a whole new picture with Jill and decided to call the album Crashon, Screamon, All Fall Down. There was apparently a different track list, minus a couple of songs, and they printed like 10 to 20,000 promo copies of this thing. The trick here is, though, it's almost never been seen. If they printed so many of these things, it's almost impossible to find them. They never turn up online. It's been seen in stores maybe once by a couple of people on the internet who see it, they've seen it. It's extremely rare. So if you have one, I'd like to see it. Just to see that it really does exist. And so there was all kinds of big promotional blitz that Jill was in the group now. She was on some magazine covers. She was on billboards and pictures and magazines and all kinds of stuff saying she was the new Mama in the Mamas and the Papas. So they get into like August and they're realizing that, while she's really, really talented and they appreciate that, the chemistry's not there. They're doing shows, they're doing songs. She could fill the void, but she's not like one of the Mamas and the Papas, as they felt. And from what I've read, Jill felt really betrayed by that because she was promised a permanent position in the group, and then she was given an undisclosed lump sum to say, well, we're going to get Michelle back. And so they got Michelle back and did a few more new songs and then re-recorded a couple parts of vocals to like kind of cover up some of Jill's stuff with Michelle's voice on top. Here's where it gets tricky, because no one is, for years, no one was accurately sure who sang what on this album. Was it Jill? Was it Michelle? Who is it? So basically, Michelle was here for the first couple months of the album's creation, basically like April to end of May, early June. Then she left. Then Jill took over for July and most of August. And then Michelle came back for the end of August, and then like a little tiny bit, I think, into September before this thing was released. So Jill is featured on a lot of these tracks, and so is Michelle. It's kind of like a split. And they did do a couple other songs that ended up on later albums, um, like "Look Through My Window," which was a single. But so yeah, this is a fascinating album. Really, just trying to figure out who is who, and I want to admit that I do owe a humongous debt to the Steve Hoffman music forums. Um, in doing my research for this album, I knew the mystery of Jill Gibson. I knew Michelle wasn't on a whole lot of this thing, and there really isn't much to know out there. And then a handful of people on those Steve Hoffman forums did a ton of legwork and actually talked to Jill. So in the description box below, I'm gonna put a link there to that message board, to the actual the thread that I found, so you can read it in much more detail that I'm gonna do in this video, which is basically a SparkNotes version. But it's a fascinating read. If you're a Moms and the Papas fan, that's like a die-hard thing to read. You'll love it. You'll eat it up. It's so fun to read. Anyways, so yeah, they're both basically on this album, and there's even different versions, like the 45 version of "Even If I Could," which was the B-side, I Saw Her Again, is Michelle, and the album version is basically Jill. There was rumors that Jill was on "Look Through My Window," but that was recorded in September of '66. That's definitely Michelle. So yeah, let's go into some details here. So the album starts off with a song called "No Salt on Her Tail," which, you know, and also I do want to add, most of this album is a John Phillips album, which is pretty cool. He wrote most of the songs on this thing. This song in particular starts off the album with a really John heavy feel. His singing is basically up front. But this song is cool. I love the slightly epic feel to this. This album is their second album, and I feel like it's a giant step forward from their last one. The first album, I love that album. I mean, there's some great songs on that thing. Monday, Monday, Go Where You Want to Go, you name it, it's on there. I was trying to think of another one I really like, but I can't remember the name of it. But yeah, that album's fantastic. But hearing this album definitely signals a growth. There are some guitar playing and chord changes on this thing that are completely out of left field that probably would make Brian Wilson's head scratch. I absolutely adore a lot of the songs on this thing, and particularly this first song. It really showcases a total maturity in all of their vocals. You know, they go places vocally that they hadn't done before. They really show like the complexity and the density. Density? I think it's a word. Of the arrangements, the vocal arrangements. I mean, they went through like boot camp doing these vocal arrangements, and it really shows. I mean, they're hard to beat, these guys vocally. Trip, Stumble, and Fall. I absolutely love Denny's voice on this track. It's so cool. And I love the classic Mamas and the Papas interweaving background vocals with the lead vocal. Just a classic sound, and a sound very unique to themselves too. But the transitions on here, the breaks are great. The middle eight harmonies I think are really fun. It's a pop song that, again, is so damn dense that it doesn't feel. You don't appreciate how complex it really is. It's dense. It's like a song by the Cars. The Cars were a seriously like dense group. Listen to some of those songs. You hear these songs and they kind of float by seamlessly, but there's a hell of a lot of detail going on in the background. And this song in particular really showcases that. The teasing breaks. You know, the enthusiasm in their voices, the enunciation, unbelievable track. Dancing Bear is a really folksy song. It sounds like something they probably would have done either as, when they were before Mamas and the Papas, like the Mugwumps and all this other stuff. It's got a really like Baroque folksy feel. And I really like it because it almost sounds like a sea shanty. It's got like this like wayfaring stranger kind of vibe, this like leery, eerie, not melancholic tone, but like a little bit of a like an old school like medieval kind of feel, and I really dig that. It's an interesting track. But Jill is definitely on this song for sure. Her voice on this song does stand out. She had a beautiful sort of airy voice, really reminiscent of Michelle's. But on this track in particular, you get to hear there's a certain depth to her voice that isn't Michelle's voice, so she sticks out a little bit on this one, which is cool. I think it works really well. Words of Love is the next track, and just an absolute smash of a classic. I mean, you got that vaudevillian dance hall piano, the clippity-cloppity wood blocks in the background, and Mama Cass just absolutely nails this song. Her voice, it just belts it out. She goes all over the place. She's sweet. She can roar a little bit. She gets a little bit rocking at times. Just a classic vocal from her. And the no in the background, to me sounds like Michelle. Apparently Jill has said that's her. Again, the world may never know, but I really like that a lot. I also love the cool, like, I wouldn't even call it a fade out, but it almost sounds like someone turned the mix down. It kind of melts down a little bit. I like that a lot at the end. My Heart Stood Still. This, to me, is one of my favorite tracks in the album. It's by Rogers and Hart. It's kind of a short song, but just an amazing version. I mean, there's so much, like, I love the chord changes that happen throughout this thing. It's just a warm spirit vocally and through the chords. The euphoric horn work, I think, is fantastic. That's a cool euphoric horn work. That's a good rhyme for you. And I really just love how expressive and angelic the voices are on this track. It's a short song, but it's an absolute standout. Hands down, one of the best songs on this album. Then it ends with Dancing in the Street, which is that classic hit by them. I mean, you got that great walking bass line, the slightly Taxman-like guitar. The group choruses are really lush and detailed, and they just grip the fun part of your soul. Everything about this song screams youth and enthusiasm and happiness and being stoked to be alive and just like going out and having a good time. They captured that so well. One thing I do want to know, on the stereo version of this album, I have both. I have mono and stereo, which I'll show. The stereo version, I think, fades out faster. When they start mentioning places in the background, like Falls Church, Virginia, and a few other places. On the mono one, I feel like it goes on for longer. On the stereo one, I feel like it cuts off faster. Could just be my ears, if you could believe your eyes and ears. So that's how it ends on side one. Side two starts off with the classic I Saw Her Again. To me, one of my absolute favorite Mamas and the Papas songs. That magical intro, like, how do you make that? It sounds like clouds parting and sunshine coming through. And, I mean, the fact that John and Denny wrote this song about Denny and Michelle being together, cheating on John, and they wrote a song about it, that's sticking with your band, man. That's some heavy stuff. But it's an absolutely brilliant song. I mean, the words are so heartbreaking. Like, oh, what can I do? I'm lonely too. And it makes me feel so good to know she'll never leave me. Like, it's just about this, like, we know this should be a one-night stand, but I don't want this to go any further than that. Like, crazy, amazing words set to beautiful music. And the bit in the middle where Denny comes in early before the last verse, the last chorus there. Rumor has it that, like, it was edited that way, and then Lou Adler liked how it was Lou Adler liked how it was added, and then kept it. But I think the real version was that Denny did come in early, much to Paul McCartney's chagrin, who heard it and was like, that had to have been an accident. There's no way someone's that clever to plan it. But it's just an absolute brilliant song. Brilliant song. Strange Young Girls. This song, I really feel like, is Michelle on here. I think there's also traces of Jill mixed in the vocals somewhere, because you have to remember, there's no way they would have re-recorded every single track. They did re-record a lot of stuff, but they also recorded their vocals as a group. Unless someone was doing a solo, maybe they had a separate mic and the other people were on a different mic doing their background tracks. That's how vocals worked back then, and hopefully still today when people record, but to try to erase somebody in a harmony is close to impossible. It's going to be very, very difficult, and also you need that blend. That magic happens once when you record all those voices to one piece of tape. That's the magic right there. So you might be able to erase, like, maybe a guide vocal or something, but also tracks get folded down. They were recording the 4-track. There's no way they would have recorded all of their voices individually. Okay, here's all 18 bits of Jill's voice for this one chorus. Like, okay, just erase all that and have Michelle do it. It's impossible. So there's probably a ton of songs in this thing where they're both on here. It's probably one of the only 5-membered Mamas and the Papas albums there is. But I do like this song a lot. There's a certain chilliness to the tension in this song. I really like the airy vocals. There's a bit of an echo on the vocals that gives it that kind of weird, I don't want to say creepy vibe, but it gives it like a sort of off-putting vibe. But it's still an interesting song. It's almost weird to think that this is a pop song on a pop album from 1966, because they're so ahead of their time with their vocal arrangements and their songwriting. They were up there in songwriting for me, right up there with like the Beatles and the Beach Boys and stuff. I think they made some of the most impressive pop songs of the 60s for the 2 years they were a band. Unbelievable. I can't wait. Has these really cool big boomy drums in the beginning. I love the shuffle on this. It's just like a classic upbeat rocker. I do think Jill's on this one for sure, but Cass's vocals and then also mixed with Jill in the background, what a combination. They were a good pair for that month that they were together. Their voices really, really worked well. Do enjoy that a lot. The dynamic changes in here, the vocal interplay, really pack a punch into this one. Again, super dense layering, super dense detail, a lot happening in a tiny condensed pop track that makes it sound easy. No way is it easy. Even if I could, again, I love the dynamic changes on this one. Again, it's still complex, it's depth, and also this is the studio version, the album version. The single version had Michelle on it. This one's got Jill on it. I can't tell if this one was re-recorded or they put Michelle's version back on to take Jill's off. Because the entire album that they did make with Jill, where they re-recorded stuff with her voice, was scrapped. And then when Michelle came back, she ended up redoing some Jill's parts, doing new songs like Dancing in the Street and Words of Love, and then, you know, basically keeping the ones that she had from before. So it's really messy to try to figure out who sang what and who's on who. So, you know, there's that. That Kind of Girl has a really, like, leery bass riff, which is kind of interesting. This album has a lot of really good bass riffs on this thing. The vocal on this one is really different. John and Denny have this really brash, almost raw, rockin' approach to it. And for me, it almost sounds like Satisfaction. Like, I get, like, that Stones vibe from this one a lot. There's a fuzzy guitar solo, which is almost borderline psychedelic. I'm almost getting, like, a Chocolate Watch Band or Electric Prunes vibe from that solo a little bit. Not a whole lot, but a little bit. Yeah, pretty cool song. And Once Was a Time, I thought, is just an amazing lyrical and vocal wordplay. It's totally like a rap or just an exercise in accuracy. There's a certain precision between the breathing and the delivery, and the fact that they're all on point the entire time is absolutely amazing. That no one messes up. Each person breathes at the right time. Each person, enunciates at the right time. What a track, and kind of like a quiet ending, but a very interesting ending nonetheless. And then that's the album. So, yeah, for an album that is kind of a mess to figure out who did what, it really is a fantastic album. So this is in fact an original mono copy, which is in pretty great shape. I mean, it's actually got all those, like pretty white cover on it. Someone must have just taken the wrapper off, like when I had it. The original sleeve is not here anymore, but I will show you the label. The Dunhill label from the 60s. I couldn't tell much of a difference between the mono and the stereo version. I was really trying to take some serious notes and figure out what was what. And beyond the end of Dancing in the Street, I was left a little short as to like what was there. And here's the stereo version, which changes the cover a little bit. So you got mono, stereo, so it just adds the word stereo up top. A little more picture on the stereo to make room for the word stereo. And then I'll go show you the record here. Same deal though. Just says stereo on it. And again, I don't think this is the original inner sleeve. I think the original one showed off albums you could buy at the time. So, yeah, so that's the Mamas and the Papas Cass, John, Michelle, Denny album, which was going to be called Crashon, Screamon, All Fall Down, with Jill Gibson, Mama Jill, in the band. But it didn't happen. It's one of those great rock and roll mysteries of albums that never were. And for me, that's absolutely fascinating. And to know that there's still people around that were involved with that is also super cool. Because you can actually find out some of the stories. The people playing on this thing, a lot of the Wrecking Crew was on here. One interesting I do want to point out, it says Hal Blaine's with an S instead of no S for Hal Blaine playing drums. Larry Knechtel on organ and piano, a bunch of people, a guy named Bones Howe engineered it. He engineered a bunch of their albums, and of course, Lou Adler produced it. He produced almost all their albums. Um, I think that's all I have to say about it. It's an absolutely fantastic album. The mess behind it, I think, is almost just as interesting as the music. And I would love to hear what you guys have to say about it. Have you ever seen a copy of Crashon Screamon? I would love to know if you've actually come across one in your life. Because I'd love to see it. But that's it. I'm going to put the link down below for the Steve Hoffman thread that I found a lot of information from, which was absolutely fantastic. So I definitely want to give credit where credit is due on that one for sure. But my name is Giggens. This has been Album Reviews with the Mamas and the Papas. Let's just call it self-titled. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. And I feel like I could talk a lot more about this album, but I'm going to stop there and just do more in the comments with you guys. So thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye-bye.